Mi'kma'ki. Welcome, everyone. Before we begin today, I would like to acknowledge that we are all working and living in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded land of the Mi'kmaq. June is National Indigenous History Month, and as treaty people in Nova Scotia, we need to learn about our shared history and reflect on how we can contribute to reconciliation. We also recognize the important contributions of African Nova Scotians who have helped shape this province in their efforts to advance equity and inclusion for everyone for the past 400 years. My name is Crystal Von Scheidt, and for those that may benefit from a visual description, I have light skin, brown hair. I'm using a headset and have a gray shirt on today. I work for the Nova Scotia Accessibility Directorate, and for those who may not know, we are an office in the Department of Justice who are responsible for the implementation of our provincial accessibility legislation. This includes accessibility standards and supporting the 108 organizations that are prescribed in the Accessibility Act, including the provincial government. We work with partners across the province to share resources, tools, and collaborate on ways to increase accessibility and support Nova Scotians with disabilities. So today is one of the many events that's happening in celebration of Access Awareness Week. That did happen last week, but we're spreading it out for a few weeks in June. So as you may know, this is an annual week-long celebration that starts the last Sunday of May and it has taken place in Nova Scotia for over 40 years, showcasing leaders and initiatives that are improving accessibility and inclusion across the province. This event is a number of educational workshops and webinars that we have hosted, and it's to encourage the public to better understand what they can do in their communities and workplaces to improve accessibility. For more information on how to register for our upcoming workshops, because we have a number that are happening throughout the year, I will put a link in the chat that will bring us to our website. So before I turn it over to our guest today, just a few notes of housekeeping. Because this webinar is being recorded, your audio and video are turned off, but you're welcome to add any comments or questions in the Q&A box or the chat, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. If you do need the auto-generated captions in Zoom, just go to the toolbar and you should see the show captions button. If it's not there, you can go to more, but there's 3 dots and it should be under that menu, as well as the transcription. If you need to follow along with that, you can turn that on. I would like to thank the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission for hosting this event today, and this session will be available to watch after the fact, posted on their website. So before we get to the main event, I would just like to introduce Joseph Fraser, the Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission. Joe was appointed in 2021, bringing over 20 years of experience in leadership in human rights, diversity, equity, and inclusion. He began his career working with adults with disabilities in the nonprofit sector and has spent time in post-secondary education, labor standards, and workers' compensation. Joe is going to take a minute and go through some background and context that initiated the initial human rights complaint. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Crystal, and good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today as we receive an update from the Department of Opportunities and Social Development on implementation of Nova Scotia's historic human rights remedy. This work emerged from one of the most significant human rights cases in our province's history. In 2014, the Disability Rights Coalition of Nova Scotia, alongside individual complainants Beth McLean, Sheila Livingstone, and Joseph Delaney, filed a complaint under the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act. The complaint alleged that persons with disabilities were being systemically discriminated against through unnecessary institutionalization and a lack of adequate community-based supports and housing options. In 2021, the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal confirmed that systemic discrimination had in fact been established. What followed demonstrates the important role that human rights law can play in advancing large societal change. Rather than remaining entrenched in a solely adversarial legal process, the parties moved into a collaborative remedy process that was grounded in accountability, participation, and systemic reform. Through Nova Scotia's human rights framework, rights holders, community advocates, government departments, and independent experts came together to develop a legally binding multi-year plan aimed at transforming systems that had failed persons with disabilities. Today's presentation will provide an update on where we are in this ongoing work. And it also serves as a reminder that where there are humans, there are human rights that protect the inherent dignity of every individual. So thank you all so much for being here. I'll pass it back to Crystal to introduce our presenter.
Thank you, Joe. It's really important to understand the background and context. So I'm going to turn it over now for the main event. We have Laura Upton, who is an executive director in the Disability Support Program within the Department of Opportunities and Social Development for the Nova Scotia government. And they will give you a status update on all of the work that is happening for the remedy today. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Crystal, and thank you very much, Joseph, for providing that context. Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Upton, and like Crystal said, I am one of the two executive directors in the Disability Support Program. I'm overseeing the sort of service delivery or operations of the program, whereas my colleague, who some of you may be familiar with, Maria Medioli, is overseeing the implementation of the remedy. But like Crystal and Joseph said, I'm here to kind of give you an update on the remedy and a little bit of background of how we got here too. So for those of you who it's beneficial to, I am a brown-skinned person with black hair and increasingly gray. I'm wearing a navy blue dress with white polka dots. So I'm going to share my slides, and I believe these are going to be posted alongside the video when that gets posted on the website as well. I'm just going to make it bigger for everyone too. There we go. Crystal, can you guys see that? Is it in full screen?
It is.
Great. Thank you very much.
Oh, we can see your next slide.
You can see the next slide.
Yeah, so yeah.
I see.
I think
Okay.
it's under display settings.
Yes, sorry. Let me try this again.
It's the default with Zoom sometimes.
Try this again. Oops, dear. That working?
No, we still see the next slide. So I think it's at the top beside the show taskbar, and then display settings is right beside that.
Sorry, we practiced this and
that's
somehow.
Okay. So right beside that, there should be a switch.
Yeah, I thought I hit that. No.
It's right at the top of your screen, and then the one right beside that to the right. Yes.
Oh, yes. There we go. I remember now. Hopefully that works. That work now?
Perfect. Yes. Now we see the full screen.
Apologies, everyone. Okay. So our agenda for today. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the people who we serve in the Disability Support Program, just to give you a bit of context of who we're talking about. I'm going to give it a little bit of an overview of the human rights remedy. I'm going to then provide a bit of an update on each of the 6 key directions and why they're important to remedying the discrimination. And then we're going to open it up to questions. So I'm going to try not to take up too much of your time because we do want to hear from the audience as well. So the breakdown of people who are served in the Disability Support Program, we have just over 6,000 people in the program right now. And roughly there's just short of 600 of those people living in institutions. I'm going to talk about those in a little bit, but that's sort of a little breakdown of how many people are currently living in community and how many people are living in institutions separated from their communities. There's about 60% of the group who are male and 40% who identify as female. About 29% of the people in the program are over 55, and 43 is the average age for the adult program. So I should note too, we do have a children's program, but I'm not really talking about that today because the human rights remedy doesn't really apply. We are going to align the children's program eventually with the remedy, but right now I'm just here to talk about kind of the adult program because that's where the finding of discrimination was found. I also included a bit of a breakdown of the types of disabilities that we're talking about. So the majority of the people in the program have an intellectual disability. Some people live with a chronic or long-term mental illness, and some people have a physical disability. And then a large proportion of people in the program have two diagnoses. So they might live with an intellectual disability and a mental illness or physical disability and so on. So that's just to kind of paint the picture of the type of people or the people who benefit from this program. So Joseph already kind of provided a bit of an overview, but I just wanted to touch on some of the key things about what the remedy is. So like Joseph said, the remedy is a response to the finding of discrimination. I should note too that the finding of discrimination was against the entire provincial government. It wasn't just about the disability support program. So the disability support program is certainly taking the lead on implementing the remedy and working to remedy that discrimination, but it's really a responsibility of all government departments to start working towards more of a human rights-based approach to how we support persons with disabilities. So the Disability Support Program and the Disability Rights Coalition worked together to find a couple of people who could come and do a big assessment of Nova Scotia and write this remedial report or this report to how to remedy that discrimination. And that report or that remedy that we call it has been agreed upon by all parties. And it's really what we're working towards to rectify that discrimination in the future. So I'll just reference the 4 grounds for discrimination. So these were the reasons why it was found that the government was systematically discriminating against persons with disabilities. So the first one is unnecessary institutionalization. And when Joseph was talking earlier about those 3 individuals, those 3 individuals were institutionalized in a hospital, even though they were medically discharged and they were ready to move back into the community. They were stuck in that hospital or that institution for years because there wasn't anything for them in the community. That was one of the findings of discrimination, is that people were being left in these institutions unnecessarily. Another was that the right to assistance was denied. So sometimes people were told they weren't eligible for the program or they weren't able to access supports in a timely manner. The third one was denial of community of choice. So we know historically a lot of people in this province have had to move out of their home communities to access the right supports. So they've had to move not because they wanted to, but because that was the only option available to them. And finally, delays in assistance. The Disability Support Program has had a long wait list, or we often call it a service request list. People have been waiting for many years for supports and assistance, and that was another finding of discrimination. So these 4 grounds are what we're trying to rectify. At the end of the remedy, which is in the spring of 28, we are hoping that all 4 of these grounds, or we're aiming to have all 4 of these grounds rectified and people have choice and control and access to assistance. So how the remedy was designed. So like I said, the province and the Disability Rights Coalition came to an agreement about hiring these 2 external experts, Eddie Bartnick from Australia and Dr. Tim Staton from British Columbia. And they came to Nova Scotia and they met with over 140 individuals. They went to different site visits, they hosted community forums, and completed an extensive document review. They then developed this report that we refer to as the remedy, and it's a 5-year plan to remedy that discrimination that I talked about in the last slide. So this document or this remedy is legally binding, and it requires regular regular reporting on the progress to the Human Rights Board of Inquiry. So twice a year, we report on our progress against the remedy and flag anything that we're behind on or any concerns. We also have an external monitor that reviews our progress and provides reports on how things are going. So the remedy outcomes. I know this is a lot of almost jargony kind of conversation thus far, but I really want to highlight that what we're aiming for here is to give people with disabilities more choice over the services they receive and where they receive them. We want people to receive person-directed support. So I'll talk a bit more about that later, but really not system-driven, but instead person-driven. And finally, we're aiming to invest in communities and make sure that communities are prepared to support persons with disabilities in their community and be truly inclusive. So this slide just kind of outlines the 6 key directions. So the authors of the remedy sort of organized it in a way that had these 6 interdependent key directions, and that's really what I'm going to walk you through today. But I'll just high level go over them here. So the first one is around individualized planning and support coordination. So we'll talk a bit more about that, but that's really having the person identifying what their goals and wishes are and what a good life in community looks like for them. Closing all institutions. So I'll talk a bit later about what an institution means, but this is probably the sort of flagship key direction that the people in the public would be most familiar with. The third one is community-based supports and services. So if we recognize that we're closing institutions, we need to make sure that the right supports and services are in place for people in community. Similarly, multidisciplinary supports. We know that some people in institutions are receiving some allied health supports like physiotherapy, occupational therapy, behavioral intervention, and so on. And we don't want to lose some of those good resources when people move to community. So we want to make sure that we have multidisciplinary teams and outreach support for people in community. The next one is individualized funding. This is a massive shift, and I'll talk a bit more about it later, but this is really a cornerstone element to enabling, success across all of these, but really in enabling key direction 1, which is around that individualized planning. And finally, strengthening disability capacity. So you may hear us say that the remedy is not a technical solution, it's a cultural revolution. So what we mean by that is we could implement all these programs and policies and system changes tomorrow, but we really need to change the philosophy and the culture in Nova Scotia about how people with disabilities are viewed and welcomed into inclusive communities. And so that's also a key direction here, and it's a key enabler for all of these other pieces too. Okay, so the first one around individualized planning and support and regional hubs. So in the disability support program before, we had care coordinators who conducted assessments, provided case management, provided funding to people, and did all of this with caseloads of like 100 people. We've now broken out that role. There will no longer be in the future a care coordinator role. We now have 3 new roles who are doing different functions and who have much lower caseloads, and they're therefore much better able to get to know the person and help the person identify what their good life in community looks like. So we have local area coordinators, which is a internationally recognized role that provides support working alongside people to help them develop their plans and find their good life in community. And I should note too that local area coordinators can work with anyone who self-identifies as having a disability. They don't need to meet the eligibility criteria for the disability support program. We also have intensive planning and support coordinators who are doing intensive planning with people. Right now, they're particularly focused on people leaving institutions and helping them transition back to community. But in the future, they'll be helping anyone to develop their plans for community. We also have eligibility funding and assessment coordinators. So these are people who will determine someone's support needs and what financial supports they may be eligible for. So those are three key roles to enabling that individualized planning. We've also are working on a peer support planning service. So this is really people with lived experience, persons with disabilities who have experience with doing planning, supporting other people who are making plans for their future. We also have a new connector role. We're moving away from kind of a medical model of an intake service, and instead we have connectors who are helping connect people with the right types of services and the right people to support them in that. And finally, I just wanted to talk about the regional hub model. So the remedy authors recognize that while we want to have consistency across the province in the services and supports available, we also recognize that each region and each community has unique circumstances and unique needs. So we have a hub model, which is not necessarily a bricks and mortar space. It's more of a collection of services delivered locally. So really, I just wanted to highlight how this will enable good life and community. It's really building that missing local community support system in that hub model. We have more opportunities to collaborate and leverage existing community-based programs. The ratios, like I said, so local area coordinators will have up to 50 people that they're supporting, and intensive planning and support coordinators will have 20 to 30 people that they're supporting. So they really have the opportunity to really fully engage with people and get to know them. And that's another key piece, is getting to know the person, one person at a time. Closing institutions. So what do we mean by closing institutions? Adult residential centers, regional rehabilitation centers, and residential care facilities are kind of the big institutional facilities that you'd probably be familiar with. They're often on the outskirts of town. They're a bit hospital-like. Those facilities are closing first. Group homes and developmental residences often look more like community homes, but they house up to 10 people in them. So anything over 4 beds needs to either reduce their census or close. So we've had a no new admissions policy on the larger facilities since January 2025, so nobody else is moving in. We have closure teams in each region working with the facilities and working with the people who live there to move them out and to move into community. We've also put in place some crisis prevention and community response programs because historically, institutions were used to respond to crises. And now that people can't go into those institutions, we need to find other ways to support people in times of need in a more community-based setting. And finally, we also have community living facilitators who are kind of like community developers. They're looking to identify assets in local communities. So really, this is about supporting people to move back to their communities of choice, to be closer to their family and their home and their friends. It's really shifting from having people fit into an existing service and more about developing a bespoke option for each person. And interestingly, it's really been about challenging unconscious bias. For people in Nova Scotia often say, well, some people have to live in institutions. And that is really a devaluation of that person and their rights. And we've really been debunking a lot of those myths by demonstrating that everyone can live in community with the right supports. And really, this work is supported by all of those 6 key directions that I talked about. Okay, so the third key direction is around community-based supports and services. So this is really about setting up new programs and services to make sure that people are able to live a good life in community. So you may have seen we have a ad campaign out there now for home share, which is where someone shares their home with a person with a disability. We're moving to individualized funding, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. We also have a school leavers program for people leaving school. So really, this is about investing in communities to enable them to welcome people. We also have been kind of collapsing some of the boundaries that we've had between different programs. So historically, you could be in a small option home, or you could be in independent living support, or you could be in a group home. And there was all these different parameters. So we're really trying to collapse all of those and just offer one option for everyone that can be tailored to each person's needs. Much less siloed and much less prescriptive. So this is really about investing and working alongside communities to make sure that services are responsive to local needs. We want people to have that sense of belonging and have relationships built on mutual respect. We really want to build capacity and have self-sufficiency versus providing services. And we want to disrupt that pathway to devaluation. We really want to have a social role valorization kind of mentality for persons with disabilities to truly feel like they're welcome and included in communities. So the next one is around those multidisciplinary supports that I mentioned at the beginning. So we have a dedicated allied health team who's working with our partners in the health sector. We're setting up these allied health teams or outreach teams in each region, and they'll be able to provide supports and services to persons with disabilities that would have previously been delivered in an institution. We want to be careful about not creating a second tier system for persons with disabilities because we want people to also be able to access the healthcare system like the rest of us would. So a lot of this is also partnering with our colleagues in other departments and in Nova Scotia Health to ensure that services are accessible and readily available to people. So this will really ensure that we've expanded the reach and scale of support for persons with disabilities as they transition to community, so they don't need to leave their home community to access supports like they historically would have. Okay, individualized funding. I feel like a lot of times when people hear the term individualized funding, they think we're just going to cut a check and give it to someone and say, see you later. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. Individualized funding is really a system term to talk about how we're providing funding to people to access the supports they need. So in the previous world, we would provide money for a bed to a service provider in a home. So a service provider might operate a small option home or a group home, and we would say, okay, here's a per diem to operate that bed. And if a person wanted to move into that home, we would say, well, here's the bed. Hopefully they can meet your needs with the amount of funding that's provided. If you choose to leave that bed, you don't have service anymore because the funding is associated with the bed, not with you. Individualized funding instead is saying, what are your unique needs as a person? How can we meet those needs from a funding perspective? And you then have the choice of how your services are provided, who they're provided by, and where they're provided. If you choose to leave or move, that funding goes with you because it's tied to you as the individual. We also are implementing an administrative backbone service, which will help people with managing their funding. So some people might choose to self-manage their funding, but it is a lot to ask of people. So we are providing this administrative service that will help people manage their funding, find supports, make sure that they're complying with tax and labor laws and so on. So if people wanted to choose to just have their funding go to that service, they can do that. It's still individualized, it's just not self-managed. Alternatively, people can also hire a service provider to manage their funding that they receive as well. So individualized funding can be used to access disability-related needs like activities of daily living, what you do during the day, community life, and continuing education. So this is really enabling that greater choice, flexibility, and control, and those bespoke options for people to live a good life in community. We're no longer saying you must fit into this program or that program. We're saying, what does a good life look like? And how can we support that for you? So I just wanted to add this slide too, because it kind of demonstrates how people can use their funding. So it helps them to choose who they live with. They can live on their own or with a friend or with their family, where they live, if they choose to own a home or rent a home in someone else's home. And like I said, how they manage their funding, if they want to self-manage, have a provider manage it, or a combination. And then the types of supports. They can choose when someone will be visiting, what types of supports they will have, if their supports are provided in their own home or somewhere else. So I just include that to kind of dispel the myth a little bit that individualized funding is sort of pushing out that responsibility. It's really not. It's really about providing that flexibility. Okay, and the last key direction is, like I said, around strengthening that disability system capacity. You can absolutely still live in an institution, even if it's only 3 or 4 beds, or even if you're in your own apartment. The real change comes from that philosophical shift. And honestly, that's been one of the most challenging parts of implementing the remedy, is having everyone understand that people with disabilities have value and have a right to live in community, and have a right to choose the life they live in the community. So the way we're tackling this is we have a lot of intergovernmental leadership and structures. We're meeting with senior leaders in the government. Like I said, this finding of discrimination was against all of government, not just the disability support program. So we're working with our colleagues at other departments to ensure that they're operating from a human rights-based approach. We have set up regional advisory councils. So each region has a council that's advising the government on the implementation of the remedy. And those councils are made up of community members, and 50% of the council is made up of persons with disabilities. We also have a disability workforce plan. So this is really about ensuring that the people who are providing supports to people are operating from a human rights-based approach. We've been working with our colleagues at the Nova Scotia Community College to develop training programs and micro-credentials to advance that work, and developing core competencies for people who are going to be working in this space. We also have some strategies to support innovation and partnerships with our service providers to help them realign their services with the remedy. So for example, we have a service evolution fund that providers can apply to so that they can start shifting the way they deliver services to be from a more human rights-based approach, and more creative for people. We also have a number of cultural change and communication initiatives. So you'll see a number of news releases when new programs and services are launched. We also have an annual conference called the Rebuilding Hope Conference that some of you may have heard of. And really all of those things are about shifting the narrative and the understanding in the public. And finally, we have a remedy website that I think Crystal's going to drop into the chat too, but there is a link here, which is a great place to see all the updates on the work that's happening. So this is really ensuring that people have a voice in their community and opportunities to truly participate and belong in their community. Okay, so that is it for my slide. So I'm going to end that and open it up for questions.
Okay, I'll just ask if people have questions to either put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen or put them in the chat. Either is fine. And if there's any specific part of the presentation that you want to learn more about or get more information on, just let us know. All right, I see one question. Oh, Laura, I'll just want to give you a second to have a quick look at the Q&A.
I can't see it.
The Q&A box, if you go
I'm
under
in the
more,
webinar chat. Oh, I'm not in the.
Go under more and then it should.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. When will the next Rebuilding Hope conference be? We don't have a date for the next conference. We are working with some of our partners on setting that up, but yeah, I don't have a date for that yet, but there will be a news release and we will be putting something on the website for that for sure. So yes, sorry, I don't have a date for that yet, but soon. Can you talk more about the crisis prevention program you referred to? Absolutely. So previously, if someone was in a crisis situation, and I don't mean a crisis situation that would require 911 or a trip to an emergency room. This might be more that someone has a crisis related to their disability, they might get some of their supports from an institution. And now that institutions are closing, we're developing more of a strategy to ensure that people have the supports they need in community. That doesn't mean going back to an institution. So the intensive planning and support coordinators have been delivered training on how to develop plans that are sort of preventative and looking at community resources for people. That's not to say that people won't end up needing to access health supports the way the rest of us would, but it is a bit more intentional about saying, okay, this is what happens when I'm in crisis, and these are the types of supports I can access and when and where those are. So hopefully that makes sense. But really, those intensive planning and support coordinators are the key in developing those plans. Can you give a specific update on the school leavers program? Yes, I'm just trying to think. So we ran the school leavers program this past year, and there was 100 students in that. We're about to start a bit of an evaluation of that program, and then in September there'll be another cohort of students who are supported in that program. But really, that is about pairing students with disabilities who are preparing to leave school with a local area coordinator to help them plan for their good life in community once they finish school. There's a lot of students who end up staying in school beyond graduation, not because they're super keen to stay in school, but because there isn't anything else for them. We really want to disrupt that pathway. If people want to stay, absolutely they can. If they have an individualized program plan, they can stay in school. But we want people to really feel like they have a choice in that, and that they have a choice to do something in community that meets their needs if they want. So that's what the local area coordinators are doing with people as part of that school leavers program. School leavers. Oh, another one. The school leavers program is currently open to 100 students across Nova Scotia. What's the expectation for expanding it to more students? Yep. So there'll be another cohort of 100 students in the next school year, and we'll continue to scale up as we go. Part of it is capacity of our staff. So in the last 2 years, we've hired 160 new staff, and some of those would be local area coordinators who can work in this program as well. So like I said, we'll continue to increase by 100 each year and see what the needs are and see what our capacity is. But there should be another round coming in this fall. Is there anything being done to work with municipalities to ready their community services, for example, disability inclusion and community recreation, for the rollout of the remedy? Yes. So when I mentioned earlier that we have conversations with senior leaders in government, those are happening regularly. So municipal affairs would be part of that. And we also will do things like go to the Union for Municipalities to talk with them about the remedy. Though a lot of those cultural change things that we've been talking about too have all been driving that kind of change and ensuring that communities are welcoming. So yes, we continue to work with our partners at Municipal Affairs to ensure that communities are ready and supportive of people. What would be the most difficult part to implement of the plan? Interestingly, I feel like if you asked me that a couple of years ago, my answer might be different. But over the last 2 years, we've done a lot of work internally on the build. So we did a lot of consultation, co-design with persons with disabilities to design all of this. So developing job descriptions for all the new roles, developing policies for all the new services and individualized funding. And now we're in it. We're launched. We have the new roles. We have the new individualized funding. People are moving out of institutions. The challenge now is making sure that everyone is accepting of a human rights-based approach to supporting people with disabilities. And change can be challenging. And I think we're starting to see that people are getting anxious about the future and anxious about how this is all going to look for them. So really being empathetic and helping people with that change is probably the biggest challenge right now, is just supporting everyone with the change, supporting persons with disabilities, supporting their families, supporting our service providers and partners, We've been on this journey for a few years, and now it's more public facing. We have to sort of bring everyone else along too. Okay, in regards to individualized funding, I understand it is support self-direction in where individuals live and access to community that's unique to them. Should they choose to live in community in a home that does not have accessibility that may be required, access to home with wheelchairs, toileting, bathing, etc., what supports are in place to support the cost to make the home accessible that can be safely accessed? So I don't have like a blanket answer for that because every circumstance is a little different. But what I can say is the planners are really key in that. So the local area coordinators or the intensive planning and support coordinators are going to work directly with the person, their family, the people who own the home in your example, to find the right solutions to ensure that that person can be safe and have their needs met in that home. So that might be accessing some other programs that are available. Yeah, it really depends on the situation, but that's what the planner's role absolutely is. You mentioned that there's an external person that is also reporting on the progress of the remedy. Who is that external person or body? Yeah, great question. So Dr. Michael Prince is the external monitor. He reviews all of our annual reports, and we have to report on a number of different targets in the remedy. He reviews that and provides a report after each annual report. So we just submitted the annual report for 2026 on May 30th this year, or like a week and a half ago, and it's actually being released publicly today. So it's great timing. And then Dr. Prince has 2 months, I believe. He'll have until the end of July to provide his response, and that will also be on the Human Rights Commission's website that Crystal posted as well. So you can see his response. You can also see his response from the last 2 years too, because we're just finishing year 3. So his last 2 reports will be there as well, and you can see what his thoughts are on our progress there. Small group homes such as Unity House, is that considered an acceptable model? So I don't actually know Unity House itself, but I would say that anything that is 4 beds or less are okay. So the large institutions, like I mentioned, the adult residential centers and regional rehabilitation centers, those have to completely close. Small option homes that are 3 or 4 beds, those are fine. Group homes and developmental residences that have more than 4 have to either reduce to 4 or close. So it depends on the provider and the actual home. But we think that many of the group homes will just end up reducing their census to down to 4. So I guess I don't know that specific home, but if it's 4 or under, it's fine. If it's more than 4, then it would have to get a bit smaller. But we do have closure specialists working with all of the facilities who are 4 beds or over to help them make that transition. And eventually, everyone living in any kind of circumstance in the disability support program will move to an individualized funding program. So even if someone's living in a small option home that doesn't have to close, their funding structure will shift to an individualized funding model, which enables the person to move out if they want to, which is something people haven't had the choice to do before. What is the progress on individuals receiving individualized funding? What system is in place to manage these funds? Yeah, so the policy has been in place since January 25, and people are transitioning into that now. But the remedy has a number of targets that we need to work towards and a number of priorities in terms of who is getting access to individualized funding first. Not surprisingly, people who are living in institutions are top priority to move into community and to move in with individualized funding. People who are in temporary arrangements, people who are leaving hospital, those people are all kind of top priority to receive individualized funding. So people who are living in small option homes or who are at home in the flex program, for example, they're going to be getting individualized funding later. I should note too that a number of our existing programs are actually individualized, like the Independent Living Support Program, the Flex Individualized Funding Program, and Alternative Family Support. Those are all individualized funding programs already. Systems in place to manage the funding. So I think I mentioned there are 3 options. for how you manage your individualized funding. One is you can totally self-manage it and purchase supports yourself. We don't anticipate many people will do that. It'll be completely their choice, but it is a lot of administrative burden. They can also choose to hire a bookkeeper or something and still self-manage. But again, I don't anticipate a lot of people choosing that, but it's one of the options. The second option is to direct your funding to a service provider. And so this would be a provider that's applied, been vetted, and approved by the department who can manage your funding on your behalf. And the third option is to use this new individualized funding backbone service. So it's an administrative service operated by a third party, paid for by the government, that can manage your funding and help you use your funding in an effective way. So the person in all three of those examples still has choice and control over how the funding is used, but they may choose someone else to sort of do the payment processing part. That makes sense. Something else I was going to say on that and I lost it. Okay, my son attends programs at Prescott Group and he would be considered this to be in his community. Will there be limits in terms of how much he will be able to spend on attending programs at Prescott? Will nonprofits like Prescott continue to be able to thrive under this new model? Absolutely. So we've been working with our partners at places like Prescott and DASC and other day program providers to help them shift their model to be more of a human rights-based approach. But absolutely, they could take their individualized funding and ask Prescott to provide some of their services during the day. There's no real limits. It would be more that that person would receive a package of funding to help them meet their needs and to live a good life in community. And they would have to make sure that they would have enough funding in that package to meet all of their needs, if that makes sense. So there's no specific amount to say this is how much you can give to Prescott. It's more like this is how much you're eligible for your whole life. And you can choose to give that funding to Prescott to provide your daytime supports in that example. So we totally anticipate that organizations like Prescott will continue into the future. We're very hopeful that they'll continue to operate because they are a very valuable resource in our community. Can people access the Backbone program now? Do they have to meet traditional eligibility for DSP to access? Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, so the Backbone program is the contract's just being signed, so we can't announce it yet. So short answer is no, it's not available yet. But we have other options in place for people who might have availed themselves of the Backbone service until it's up and running. So they can't access that yet. In terms of if they have to meet traditional eligibility for DSP, yes, they would have to meet the disability eligibility criteria in order to be eligible for individualized funding. So they would have to have an intellectual disability, a long-term mental illness, and/or a physical disability, and a functional need on top of that. And they would have to meet the financial eligibility criteria. So those pieces would still apply. When you say traditional eligibility criteria, I just want to reference too that the remedy did ask us to make some changes to eligibility. We previously had some eligibility criteria that said if your needs exceed what the disability support program can provide, you're not eligible. It no longer says that. It's more about a collaborative approach with some of our partners to meet your needs. So I just wanted to kind of note that too. Okay, Kim said, you mentioned the remedy is with the province and it's really about individuals having a good life and community. Based on your experience, what other areas do you think need more work really to make that a reality for individuals? For example, community organizations, employers, transportation, housing, health, education, etc. That's a good question, Kim. I really think that the key is for everyone in the province to start recognizing people with disabilities as having value and being contributing members of society in a variety of different ways. That doesn't necessarily mean working a full-time job, but it means that they have a social role in their community and they're valued and part of it. We've also recognized that historically, people with disabilities will often spend their entire day with people who are paid to spend time with them. That's not a typical way of spending your life. I don't spend time with people who are paid to be with me all day. I mean, sometimes at work, but I also have other aspects of my life where I'm a valued person in different roles, and it's not one aspect of my life doesn't completely define me. So one of the key pieces that our planners are doing is helping people develop a network of support and develop those connections that give them that social role in community. That's a key element that they now have the skill set and the capacity to do that our previous care coordinators weren't able to do. We really want to encourage that kind of community development around that person, I guess, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, Kim, but really I would love to see everyone kind of step up to become truly welcoming of people. And I don't just mean that from a physical accessibility, but also just from a values perspective. Okay, I signed a DSP declaration of statutory decision maker form. Does this have any relevance in addressing my brother's transition out of an ARC? So yes, in so much as you would be sort of a key person in helping that person develop a plan. So our planners are working with the individuals for sure, but they're also working with their support networks, the people who are important to them. We recognize that understanding a person from a holistic perspective means you need to gather information from a variety of sources. And you, as that person's supported decision maker, are a key person in that and helping to identify or helping the person to work through their identification of what a good life looks like in community for them. You'll be a key player in that. I mean, we could have a whole webinar on supported decision making and what the remedy says about that. So maybe that we'll put that on for next time. Do you have any examples of how opportunities in social development have been working with municipalities to support inclusion initiatives? I don't have anything at my fingertips. Like I said, we've been working with our senior leaders at municipal affairs around the remedy. There aren't any specific initiatives between the Disability Support Program and Municipal Affairs around inclusion initiatives. We've been working with Municipal Affairs on changing bylaws, for example, I guess. We had a number of municipalities that had covenants and bylaws that were quite frankly discriminatory towards persons with disabilities. So we've worked with them to rectify those. But I can't think of anything off the top specifically around inclusion initiatives. Just keep an eye on the time here.
Yeah, you take a minute to
Yeah.
review. There's a lot of questions, and we're not
Oh,
going to be
okay.
able to get
Okay.
to all of them.
Okay.
I'll just mention one thing because the work that we're doing at the Accessibility Directorate is sort of parallel to what Opportunities in
Mm-hmm.
Social Development is doing. And so, based on requirements in the Accessibility Act, all municipalities do need to have their own accessibility plans that need to be updated every 3 years. And so there is work that's happening that will influence and affect the quality of life for people with disabilities in their communities. And it's sort of a multi-pronged approach between what we're doing and what Opportunities in Social Development is doing. And I can put a link in the chat to some of that work too, if people are interested. So maybe Laura, if you want to pick a few questions,
Okay.
because there's
Yes,
lots of engagement,
apologies. We
and
can't get to them all. Yeah.
no, I'm really glad that there's been this much interest. And
Yeah.
one thing I will say, Laura, is if you have a suggestion at the end of where people can find more information or
Mhm.
a contact or somewhere that I can direct people to get their specific questions answered, let me know and I can
Yeah.
put that in the
I
chat too.
think the website is the best bet. But Crystal, I don't know too if we can save these questions and I can kind of try and address them and put them on the website or something.
Yeah,
We do
I
have,
can
yeah,
do
sorry.
that. Yeah.
We do have an extensive Q&A on the website, so people can also check there because I actually see some of the questions that are here are answered on the website too. But we could also map the questions that I don't get to here onto the website too, and people can access them there if someone, Crystal or somebody, can save these somehow.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, so recognizing we've only got a couple of minutes left, I am going to try and do a quick hit on a couple. How do we measure whether a human rights remedy has truly improved the quality of life for people with disabilities? So one thing I didn't mention is that we are starting a quality of life study specifically on people with disabilities transitioning from institutions. We could, if we wanted to, just shut the doors of all the institutions and kick everyone out tomorrow. We recognize that that won't enable a good life and community for anybody because the right supports and services aren't in place for people until they've had a robust plan and until all the right services for that person are in place. Recognizing that, we're undertaking this study that will be monitoring people's progress from when they're in the institution to when they're living in community and follow-ups thereafter to really ensure that people's lives have improved because that's the whole purpose here. The purpose is not simply to close the institutions, it's to ensure people have a better life. So we are undertaking that study. The other thing I should mention too is that the remedy required us to hire or contract an external evaluator. So this is in addition to that external monitor that I mentioned before, Dr. Michael Prince. We have an external evaluation team who's going to look at all of the services we're implementing and evaluate their effectiveness. So a couple things that we're doing on that to ensure that we're moving the needle in the right direction. There's some longer questions here, so maybe I'll just do one of the shorter ones here. What are specific provides available to keep track of individualized finances? So there are a number of tools that the planners have at their disposal that they can give people to help them with tracking and managing their finances should they choose to self-manage their funding. There's a number of tools and forms and letters of agreement that you can have with the people you're employing. But I think the key thing is that people can direct their funding to a service provider or to the backbone service to have someone else manage all of that. So it's kind of two-pronged. If you want to self-manage, there's a number of resources we can provide. If you don't want to self-manage, then you can ask one of those agencies to help you with that. Okay, so maybe I'll leave it there, and apologies for not getting to everyone's questions. I really appreciate that everyone has so many questions. It's really inspiring to see so much engagement. But I did want to leave a minute or two for wrap up as well.
Sure.
So
And
yeah,
is there like an email or something that if people are looking to connect individually with someone that you would recommend? Is that's on your website?
Yeah, so there is an email there. I think it's just dsp@novascotia.ca. I can check here while you're wrapping up.
Okay.
But there is like a contact form on the website there. And like I said, we'll take these questions away, find answers, and put them on the Q&A on the website.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But if people are already in the program, they can also reach out to their current care coordinator or local area coordinator or intensive planning and support coordinator if they have any specific questions as well.
And is there a way for people to find out who that is or how to contact their
Yeah, I
local?
mean, I think most people who are in the program would know who their person is. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to.
Yeah, no, good question.
Hold on, that didn't post. Okay, so I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time today. I'm really happy that we have this much engagement and it shows an interest, and hopefully we will be able to put on other sessions in the future because I think there's lots of questions and there's lots of work happening and there's a need to communicate it. So thank you for the time and your interest. I'm just going to put a link in the chat that has an evaluation. Just a couple quick questions. Please take the time and let us know what you think, and it'll help us plan for future sessions for Access Awareness Week. I'll also make sure that I get a list of people that attended if you don't have the time right now, and send a follow-up email. And have a great day, everyone. Thanks so much.